In the last video, we spoke about planning your final piece. So your task was to create your own double page of final piece planning based on the project that you've been working on. So it makes logical sense in the narrative part of the project that you've built up right from the mind map up until this point. So you should now have a double page with some possible composition layouts, some reflective notes about those composition layouts, and some rationale, some notes about the ideas and what you're actually intending to do. And maybe some drawings of what it could look like or what elements of this composition could look like. So that's a nice finished double page. As you can see, it's visually balanced. It has clear headings which stand out. It's got some mixed media work on there, and it's got some reflective notes and planning notes. So some of the notes say, I'm not really sure yet how I'm going to resolve this or how it's going to look. And that's absolutely fine. In fact, it's totally normal at this stage not to be 100% sure of how things are going to play out in that final piece. And that's what examiners and moderators will want to see, you working through those problems, of you resolving those creative challenges yourself. So speaking of challenges, I mentioned at the end of the last video about problems and solutions. So problems and solutions is a useful phrase to talk about heading off things that might happen and being prepared to resolve those problems as they arise. As I said, we can't prepare ourselves for everything, but we can predict that some things are going to maybe cause us a bit of an issue. So it's a good idea at this point to think about what those things are. So I decided to use a ready-made canvas for my final piece. In my problems and solutions page here, I've talked about the canvas and kind of analyzed the structure of the canvas and compared it to the structure of the paper. And I've also talked about the possible problems that could arise from scaling up. So from the start of this project, I've worked on quite a small scale, so kind of A4 and smaller. And the canvas it's not quite A3 size, but it's certainly bigger than A4. So I've been thinking about how my work is going to look different. It's going to feel different on a larger scale. And I've done a little drawing there of some acrylic gesso, which gesso is basically just like a thicker acrylic paint, which you can use as a primer for a canvas. And I did prepare my canvas with some acrylic gesso on the surface before I started working on it, because it was an old canvas that I'd recycled, so it already had some marks and things on it. So in my text box here, I've said, I'm a bit worried about working on a larger scale. As up until now, I've been working on A4. I'm going to experiment on A3 to see if my composition designs will look good on a larger scale. I found an old colouring canvas that I could use. It will be sturdier than the paper I have been using so far. So you can see that in these notes, I've started to address some of those potential problems and started to think about what the solutions might be. I haven't come up with any solutions yet, but I've sort of started to think about it. So let's just go back to this diagram right here. So the paper surface, I've described it as thinner, easier to cut and manipulate the surface, smoother, easier to draw on and achieve fine detail, and it seems less permanent. Those are features of the paper medium that may seem obvious, but we need to now compare them to the medium that I'm going to be using, the canvas. So I did a little diagram of the canvas surface here, and I've described it as sturdier, can hold bold textures better. So if you put those bold textures down on paper, the paper is maybe going to struggle to hold them. It's going to warp and bend, and it won't have much structural integrity. The canvas surface is going to provide a more sturdy surface. Okay, the canvas surface is rougher, it's harder to get fine detail on there. And that's in comparison to paper, where you can get really nice fine detail with pen, watercolor, pencil. All of the media that I've used throughout this project has been quite easy to do on a paper surface. But when you're transferring that onto a canvas surface, it's going to look different because the surface of the canvas is rough and bobbly. So my marks are going to look different on the canvas, and I need to be aware of that. And then finally, I've said here that the canvas has more of a serious fine art feel to it. What does that mean? It means that when you do something on paper, it can feel quite temporary and quite throwaway, whereas when something's on a canvas, it feels serious. It feels like this is a proper artwork that you might see in a gallery or a museum. This is something that somebody might hang on their wall, so it feels like proper, the real thing. Now, this feeling can give an artwork an increased sense of status, which is great for a final piece. But it can also make you feel, when you start working on it, that you have a different relationship with this piece. This piece is more important. And that can actually make people clam up a bit sometimes. And it can make your mind go blank. There's something so direct and kind of low stakes about doing stuff on paper that gives you a kind of freedom, and that freedom allows you to experiment and be expressive and make mistakes and not worry about the process. Whereas when you start working on a more kind of serious and final medium like canvas, it can actually take away some of that spontaneity and make your process less free and expressive. And that can actually result in a reduction in the quality of the work, or how much you enjoy the work, or how rich and layered the work can be. So I would really encourage you to think carefully about the media that you're using in your final piece, how those media are different from what you've been using so far, if they are, how they compare. I would encourage you to do a kind of compare and contrast with some diagrams, do some planning in terms of the scale and the preparation of your surface or your working media, and be really honest as well in your reflections. So I've said here, I'm a bit worried about it. I don't know yet how I'm going to resolve that, and that's fine. I've put that all here in some reflective notes. I have presented the page in a consistent and attractive way, lovely bold heading, careful work here, different media used, bit of pencil, collage. So that's my problems and solutions page. And your task now is to do a problems and solutions page yourself, to head off some of the potential issues that you may have when you're translating your final piece plan into the real thing.